Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Thursday, April 17th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside will be cool today, with a high of 59.4 degrees and a low of 53.6, so you might want to grab a light jacket if you're heading out. Coming up on today's show, we'll examine the question of accountability for those who defy deportation orders and what enforcement mechanisms are currently in place. Then, we'll analyze how Trump's tariff policies are transforming various sectors of the American economy, including their impact on consumer prices, manufacturing, and international trade relationships. We'll look at which industries are seeing the biggest changes and what these economic shifts mean for everyday Americans. That's all ahead on Alex's News. Good morning, viewers. A federal judge has found probable cause to hold the Trump administration in criminal contempt for willfully violating court orders regarding deportations to El Salvador. Joining us now with more details is our legal affairs correspondent, Ethan. Ethan, can you explain what led to this extraordinary finding?
Good morning, Grace. According to PBS NewsHour, this situation began when U.S. District Judge James E. Boasberg explicitly ordered the Trump administration not to deport migrants under the Alien Enemies Act, which President Trump invoked in March 2025 due to concerns about the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua. When Judge Boasberg learned deportation planes were already en route to El Salvador, he issued an emergency directive for the planes to be turned around.
But I understand the deportations went ahead anyway?
That's right. Despite the clear order, NBC News reports that the administration proceeded with the deportations, even launching flights during the emergency hearing itself. El Salvador's president, Nayib Bukele, confirmed the deportees' arrival in his country, essentially confirming the violation of the judge's order.
How is the administration defending its actions?
They're taking a rather technical approach, Grace. According to PBS NewsHour, the administration claims the judge's verbal turnaround directive wasn't included in the written order and that the planes had already left U.S. airspace when the order was issued. Judge Boasberg rejected this interpretation, stating such a technical reading would lead to what he called absurd mischief.
This all stems from the use of something called the Alien Enemies Act. Can you help our viewers understand what that is?
Absolutely. According to reporting from Perplexity, the Alien Enemies Act is a 227-year-old law from 1798 that empowers the president to apprehend, detain, and remove non-citizens who are nationals of a country at war with the United States, or who are engaged in hostile actions against U.S. territory. Historically, it's only been invoked 3 times before 2025, during the War of 1812, World War I, and World War II, all during declared wars.
So what makes this use of the act so controversial?
What's unprecedented here is that Trump's invocation on March 14, 2025, marks the first time it's been used during peacetime and against a non-state actor. The administration declared that all Venezuelan citizens aged 14 or older who are members of Tren de Aragua, a gang designated as a foreign terrorist organization, are alien enemies, subject to immediate deportation without standard judicial review.
I understand the Supreme Court has also weighed in on this matter.
They have, Grace. CNN reports that the Supreme Court recently ruled that migrants targeted under the act had brought their case in the wrong court. The court stated individuals are entitled to contest their deportation, but must do so in the districts where they're held, not in Washington, D.C. However, Judge Boasberg maintained that disobeying a court order before it's overturned can still be punishable.
What happens next in this legal deportation? Sorry, I meant to say legal deportation. Disputation.
Well played, Grace. Judge Boasberg has given the administration until April 23, 2025, that's just 6 days from now, to either purge itself of the contempt finding by taking steps to return the deportees to U.S. custody, or to identify the individuals responsible for ignoring his order. NBC News reports that if they don't purge their contempt, they must file declarations identifying who made the decision to proceed with the transfers.
And if they fail to comply?
Then we could see Boasberg launch hearings and potentially refer the matter for prosecution. According to CNN, the judge is requesting sworn statements from individuals who can attest to the decisions made and could potentially request live testimony or appoint a special prosecutor if the statements are unsatisfactory.
How has the White House responded to this contempt UOUS situation?
The White House has indicated plans to appeal the ruling, according to NBC News. Meanwhile, PBS NewsHour reports that President Trump has criticized Judge Boasberg, calling him a radical left judge and escalating his criticism of the federal judiciary.
Thank you, Ethan, for helping us understand this complex legal battle that raises significant questions about executive power limits and judicial authority in immigration enforcement.
My pleasure, Grace. As this case unfolds, we'll continue to monitor whether it's a court order or more of a court suggestion in the administration's view.
Thanks again, Ethan. We'll be right back with our second story after this break. Good morning. I'm here with our economic correspondent, Chloe Winters, to discuss a major legal challenge to federal trade policy. California has just filed a lawsuit against former President Trump's tariffs, claiming they're causing significant harm to the state's economy. Chloe, what can you tell us about this developing story?
Good morning, Grace. According to USA Today, California Governor Gavin Newsom and Attorney General Rob Bonta filed this lawsuit yesterday in the United States District Court for the Northern District of California. They're seeking to block Trump's tariffs, arguing they're illegally harming California's economy, which at $3.9 trillion in 2023 was the nation's largest.
What's the legal basis for California's challenge? This seems like an unusual move for a state to make.
It is unusual, Grace. The lawsuit claims Trump's use of the International Economic Emergency Powers Act, or IEEPA, to impose tariffs is unlawful because the act doesn't explicitly authorize tariffs. California officials are invoking what's called the Supreme Court's, quote, major questions doctrine, end quote, which requires clear congressional authorization for executive actions with vast economic significance.
Can you explain that doctrine for our viewers who might not be familiar with it?
Certainly. As Perplexity explains, this doctrine has been applied by the Supreme Court in recent cases like Biden versus Nebraska in 2023, where the court struck down the Biden administration's student loan forgiveness program for lacking clear congressional authorization. Essentially, it means the president can't make huge economic decisions without Congress specifically giving them that power.
And what's at stake for California specifically?
The economic impact is enormous. According to Newsom's office, Trump's policies have already inflicted hundreds of billions of dollars in economic losses on the state. California relies heavily on trade with Mexico, Canada, and China, its top 3 trading partners. The tariffs are affecting over 60,000 small business exporters and limiting access to construction materials needed for rebuilding after the Los Angeles fires.
Is there any precedent for states challenging federal tariffs this way?
That's what makes this case so interesting, Grace. Perplexity notes there's no specific precedent for states directly suing the federal government over tariffs imposed under IEEPA. In fact, IEEPA has never been used to impose tariffs before the Trump administration. The closest precedent comes from 1971, when President Nixon used the Trading with the Enemy Act to impose a 10% tariff during a monetary crisis.
I understand Michigan is also feeling significant impacts. What's happening there?
You could say they're feeling quite the tariff IC pressure, Grace. WDET 101.9 FM, Detroit's public radio station, reports that Michigan's auto industry is particularly vulnerable. In an interview with Wayne State University labor expert Merrick Masters, WDET highlighted concerns from auto suppliers and automakers that these tariffs could devastate businesses and increase car costs. A study by the Center for Automotive Research estimates the tariffs could cost Detroit's big 3 automakers nearly $42 billion annually.
Let's talk about the broader economic impact. How are these tariffs affecting inflation and consumer prices?
According to Perplexity, the tariffs have led to higher prices as importers pass these taxes to consumers. This effect ripples through the supply chain, raising prices on both imports and domestic goods that use imported components. In 2025, tariff hikes, including rates on Chinese goods up to 125%, have contributed to inflation rising by approximately 2.3%. That translates to an average household consumer loss of around $3,800 in 2024 dollars.
And what about the impact on jobs and economic growth?
The outlook isn't rosy. The tariffs have reduced real GDP growth by about 0.5 to 0.9 percentage points this year. Long-term, the economy could be 0.4 to 0.6% smaller, meaning a persistent annual loss of $100 billion to $180 billion. Employment-wise, previous Trump-era tariffs were associated with a loss of approximately 142,000 jobs in certain sectors, and these new ones could be worse.
So while the government collects revenue from tariffs, consumers are bearing the brunt?
Exactly, Grace. While projections estimate $2.2 trillion in federal revenue over the next decade from these tariffs, that gain is offset by broader economic losses. Consumers face higher prices on many goods and clothing, and textiles have seen increases as high as 17%. Lower-income households are hit hardest, with estimated losses of $1,700 annually. It's a case where the government's tariff revenue is coming directly from consumers' pockets.
Thank you, Chloe, for that comprehensive look at how these tariffs are impacting our economy. We'll certainly keep an eye on California's lawsuit as it progresses through the courts.
My pleasure, Grace. As they say in economics, there's no such thing as a free lunch, or in this case, a tariff without consequences.
Okay, here are some other headlines. The Trump administration is moving to end the IRS Direct File program, a free electronic system introduced under the Biden administration that allowed taxpayers in select states to file their returns directly with the IRS at no cost. The program, funded by the Inflation Reduction Act and piloted successfully in 2024 with overwhelmingly positive user feedback, was expanded for the 2025 tax season. However, development for the 2026 season has reportedly been halted following pressure from commercial tax preparation companies and involvement from Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency. Critics argue this decision favors corporate interests over taxpayers, potentially increasing filing costs for average Americans, and represents a significant loss of a valuable public service. In Gaza, ongoing violence continues to escalate. An Israeli airstrike on April 11 reportedly killed 10 members of the Al-Farah family, including 7 children. Subsequent strikes on April 16 killed at least 25 people across the Strip, including 10 members of the Hassouna family, whose home was sheltering displaced individuals. This follows major Israeli operations in March that ended a ceasefire and resulted in hundreds of Palestinian casualties. The Israeli defense minister has stated troops will remain in captured areas indefinitely, designating them as security zones. The conflict exacerbates a severe humanitarian crisis, with the UN raising alarms about food cutoffs and potential famine conditions amid widespread displacement. Turning to Taiwan, the Ministry of National Defense has revealed that 62 active-duty military personnel hold residency permits issued by the Chinese government. While holding this specific, quote, residence permit for Taiwan residents is legal and does not confer Chinese citizenship, Defense Minister Wellington Koo stated these individuals are barred from sensitive military duties, including handling intelligence or advanced weapons systems, due to potential security risks. This situation highlights ongoing concerns about China's influence tactics and potential vulnerabilities within Taiwan's military, prompting increased counterintelligence recruitment and training. Environmental groups are raising alarms over a proposed rule change by the Trump administration that would redefine harm under the Endangered Species Act. Announced by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and National Marine Fisheries Service, the proposal seeks to limit the definition of harm to direct actions that kill or injure protected species, explicitly excluding significant habitat destruction or modification unless it directly causes such injury. Critics warn this would gut habitat protections crucial for species survival, allowing activities like logging and drilling to proceed with fewer restrictions, effectively undermining decades of conservation efforts. The proposal is now open for public comment. And finally, a federal judge has ruled that a lawsuit filed by major labor unions including the AFL-CIO and SEIU, against Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, can move forward. The unions are seeking to block DOGE from accessing sensitive Labor Department systems containing personal medical and financial records, arguing the committee lacks legal authority and that such access violates the Federal Privacy Act. While some specific claims were dismissed, the core challenge to DOGE's access authority will proceed in court. This is one of several lawsuits DOGE faces regarding its access to various government databases. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Sonnet 3.7, Gemini Pro 2.5 Experimental, Gemini Flash 2.0, Perplexity Sonar Pro, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.